And this is Mr. Beck.
Mysterio?
What?
Doesn't matter. It's just what my friends been calling me.
Well, you can call me Quentin. But you handled yourself well out there today. Saw what you did with the tower. We could use someone like you on my world.
Thanks. I'm sorry, your world?
Mr. Beck is from Earth, just not yours.
There are multiple realities, Peter. This is Earth, Dimension 616. I'm from Earth 833.
I'm sorry, you're saying there's a multiverse? Because I thought that was just theoretical. I mean, that completely changes how we understand the initial singularity. We're talking about an eternal inflation system, and how does that even work with all the quantum? It's insane. Sorry. It's really cool.
Eternal inflation is the idea that baby universes are being created all the time. It's actually a dominant theory in cosmology today, not just an idea invented in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. When Tom Holland's Peter Parker, aka Spiderman, starts babbling on about the multiverse in 2019's Spider-Man: Far From Home, he's actually babbling about current quantum mechanics and string theory. What it suggests is that, yes, parallel universes exist. For those that have been involved in both, IT support and customer support can feel like parallel universes. The tools are similar, and they both work toward resolving customer issues. But Matt Beran points out that despite these similarities, there are some striking differences between the two universes. Whether there's a universe where Peter Parker is working IT support is still up for debate. This week on Next in Queue, Matt and I discuss why Matt has been dubbed the negotiator, differences between IT support and customer support, the impact of cloud adoption on IT management, current information security challenges, how quantum computing may impact security, and an unexpected detour into the world of composting. Let's get to it.
Welcome to Next in Queue, the podcast for contact center and customer experience professionals. Next in Queue is brought to you by Happy 2 Vision. Eliminate blind spots and see right through every conversation with Happy 2 Vision. Learn more at happitu.com. Now, here's your host, Rob Dwyer.
Back for another episode of Next in Queue. Today, I have Matt Beran, aka the Negotiator, next in queue. Welcome, Matt. How are you?
Thanks for having me on, Rob. Good to see you.
It's good to see you as well. I feel like I should clarify for the guests that you and I are both in something called 2020-ish, put out by some friends of ours, Luke Jameson and Michael Matson. And your superhero nickname is the Negotiator per them. How excited were you to get that nickname?
You know, that is a pretty badass nickname, actually. I don't actually think of myself as a negotiator, but when I listed my superpower as being able to get groups of people to agree, then I realized now I know why they called me that. I never thought of it as a negotiation as much as like, I don't know, listening and alignment, I guess.
Now you've got a new word for it. You can just shrink things down.
Yep.
Matt, you are a fellow geek, and that's mostly the reason that I invited you on the show, if I'm being honest. Tell us first a little bit about you, and then a little bit about what it is that you do.
Cool. Yeah. So I got into the service and support industry as my first career out of college. Did customer service for Great Clips Corporate. So if you've ever had your hair cut somewhere, I probably know the franchisee or did know at one point. And, from there, I kind of fell in love with all of the back office, even just the support and service function. I fell in love with it and quickly migrated over to an IT shop that needed service desk agents, and they were growing out their service desk team. And I fell in love with it more because there was even more complexity and more nerdiness to get my hands dirty. And there was still, of course, the usual call volume and personal person-to-person support, the power skills, the soft skills that you have to leverage. And that was so much fun. And after those 2 jobs, I realized I wanted to be in this industry forever. Took a consulting gig, did ServiceNow implementations for 11 years, and then realized that ServiceNow is the new Oracle. And I don't really like working for Oracle or SAP or, huge organizations. I feel like sometimes they're too big, they must fail in many ways. And then shortly after my many stints doing ServiceNow implementations, joined Invigate. And Invigate is, of course, a competitor to ServiceNow, one of the smaller dogs in the market, but really making huge growth strides with some massive financial backing that we got last year. So it's been an exciting ride. We're growing quite a bit. So it's, as you know, there's a lot of chaos when you're growing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're giving English majors hope for a job all across the country, I'm sure.
Nice. I love that you dig a little bit into the history and just kind of pull that out.
I mean, I got to have a little bit of fun. It is always interesting to me to see kind of what people studied, what they thought they were going to do, and then where we end up. And I think it's good advice for everyone who maybe is ending their high school career going, I don't know what I want to do. Like, it's okay. None of us knew what we wanted to do. And
Bingo.
Most of us ended up okay. And even if we did study this one thing, it doesn't mean that that's where you're going to end up long term.
Exactly.
So we are going to talk today about the differences between IT support and customer support. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize that there's a difference if they've never worked in an organization where there's an IT support desk. Maybe they don't have a lot of experience in that realm. But certainly, I think most of us understand customer support or customer service, whether that's in person or on the phone. But these are not wildly different worlds, but they are different worlds. It's like a parallel universe. So let's just start with what's different in the parallel universe that is IT support desk.
Yes. Great place to start. And I think if this doesn't resonate with you, leave a comment. Like, we want to continue this discussion because this is such a fascinating problem or a juxtaposition, if you will, that in customer service and customer support, your intention is to retain that customer's revenue. You're going to get money from them. They're going to continue. It's like a partnership. And in the IT space, it's more like they have to use the service desk. They have no other option. You can't shop the market for IT support. Sure, you can ask your uncle, your cousins, your nephews, your nieces. You can ask them for tech support for your company, but you're kind of stuck using the IT service that your company uses because there's so much custom work there. There's so much whether it's security related around your device and just protecting that endpoint, or security related in the applications. What you see in an application in an enterprise might be different than a public version of that application. And then, they can't just go and, if they don't like the service, they can't just go somewhere else. They have to go through you. So that's a very interesting juxtaposition between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. So, how does that then impact kind of the culture of the service desk, the culture of the leadership around that? Like, how is that different?
I love this question because in the customer support, in the external facing support functions, we have this concept of CX, customer experience. And a lot of times in the CX space, it's hard to raise funds. It's hard to get executives to believe in customer experience and invest in it. How do we, research these people, understand what their problems are, and then solve their problems? But on the IT side, it's not necessarily that we're worried about the customer experience because they're going to attrition. IT's customers are employees. And this is why I think experience management as a discipline is such a fascinating concept, because in the context of how you're interacting with an organization is going to determine what kind of experience you're measuring. So we say this all the time in IT, that employee experience drives customer experience. So if your employees are unhappy with your technology, unhappy with your systems, then when they're providing support and service and products to your customers, they will also be frustrated doing it within those systems. So that's kind of like one of the things that we try to communicate, is that employee experience actually matters. And then we have the advantage of being able to do a lot more in that space. And you would think that IT isn't actually that interested in experience management because we're a cost center. The less you spend on IT, the more revenue you actually get to realize. But our customers are prisoners in a way. I don't mean that to sound so negative, but we not only have access to their version of our application, we have access to their computer. We have access to their email. We have access to chat. We can actually, like in many organizations, especially some of the larger ones, it's very common for HR and IT to have a system to literally watch employees use their computers. Or measure activity, or see how this computer is performing. And so we have a lot more insight into the total employee experience that we can leverage and gain insight from and really optimize for. But the question is, do we actually want to do it? Do we want to spend money on doing it, especially on employee experience? Because again, IT is seen as a cost center. It's taking money away from us. So why would we invest more? But I think if you're in the CX space, you understand that if we did invest more in that space, then the employees will be happier, and the customers will be happier, revenue, share price, everything goes up from there, hopefully.
Yeah. There are two things that these aren't recent, but relatively, that I'm curious to get your take on how they have impacted the way service desks operate. The first is cloud adoption. So let's talk about that. How has the adoption of cloud, and keep in mind for the audience, like not everyone has got everything on cloud. There are tons of companies, especially large enterprise companies, that are still using all kinds of legacy on-prem systems, but cloud adoption continues to increase. What has that, if at all, impacted with the way that we manage IT as service desk professionals or IT management professionals?
We have this concept that we created, about 15, 20 years ago, called shadow IT. And the concept kind of came from the way that Salesforce went to market. And it was really, Salesforce was making sales reps really successful. And so sales reps would talk and they heard from each other, oh, this is what's making me successful. And they would they would actually go and buy Salesforce. And back then it was $100 per month per user. And so that you had all these sales reps that were buying Salesforce, putting customer information into Salesforce, and then really being successful with it. And that is kind of how Salesforce made its way into so many organizations, because, of course, we want revenue to go up. And of course, if sales reps are finding tools that make that happen, let's get those tools on board, right? It's an obvious spend. But the concept of shadow IT is pervasive. And that is one of the largest problems that we will always have in IT. From the website you visit that you're not supposed to go to an application that you're installing that you're not supposed to install, to the AI tools that you're using that you're not supposed to be using. The shadow IT realm is where IT really lives, because what we inherently understand is that whenever there is shadow IT, there is pent up demand. There's demand for something, whether it is AI. And you kind of see this in organizations now, where a lot of organizations for the AI change that's happening are having regular meetings. What tools are you using? What tools are you using? And the really good organizations are not only brainstorming what they're using, but they're also developing a committee around safety and security of those tools. And so that's kind of what IT is always trying to do, is try to meet those demands, but also the constraints. So IT is kind of in between, cybersecurity, regulation, SOX compliance, like all of these compliance factors, and then the demands of the employees. And we have no option to raise our prices. We have no option to address a bigger part of a market. Our total addressable market is our employees. That's it. And so because we can't raise our prices, we're stuck with this limited budget, but we still want to provide a great experience and comply with compliance needs. If I'm in IT and I see all these new technologies being put into our ecosystem, into our infrastructure, I want to basically have a list of those things, because that's what helps me stay compliant. It helps me understand what I'm spending. It helps me manage those things. And for cloud adoption, I think that was one of the first times that IT really got a slap in the face. Like, there is software that is being used out in the cloud, and you don't even know that your employees are using it. And so as such, a lot of the asset management tools in our space, in the service management space, have started to watch that, pairing with a web platform to understand what websites people are going to, and then understanding that those SaaS applications need to be managed in a new way. Because before, all we had to do was look at a computer and see what apps are installed, and those are the applications you're using. Now we need to see every website you go to, and then we need to know if it's a SaaS tool or not. And then we kind of determine to a repo. We should manage this thing, make sure we know who has access to it, make sure there's not like 4 instances of it where marketing has one and sales has another, and just kind of put some governance around this thing so that we comply, we don't waste money, and we get what we want out of it.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there, and you really touched on really the next aspect of that, and that is both the security aspect and coupled with the rise of AI in ways that I think, if we looked back a year ago, probably none of us would have predicted how quickly things would morph. What are you seeing in the industry today to guard? Because that I feel like is also one of the differences, right? I mean, yes, frontline customer service agents they take training every year about security and privacy and all of these things, right? And they are an integral cog in making sure that customer information stays safe. But really, IT is like, if somebody's going to fall on the sword, it's IT. So, like, how has that group changed, or have they changed when it comes to security and managing privacy, because we see it all the time, right? I just saw AT&T had another breach and they're in the news again, and it's not the first time. And I'm a T-Mobile customer. I've been breached multiple times. Like, it just feels like it's a never-ending onslaught. What's going on with the poor IT folks who are in charge of protecting?
Yeah, it's an unenviable job, really. It totally is. There's this concept of DevSecOps, which stands for Development, Security, and Operations. There's this idea of a SOC, a Security Operations Center, and kind of depending on your organization, you may have an entire department focused on information security. Specifically, if you're in finance, you probably have information security, and they're probably on every agile team and every project across your entire organization. And they are the ones that are making sure that we're not only using data well on a regular basis, but then also that we're making big project decisions with that security in mind. And I think that's kind of like just the tip of the iceberg. And you said it. You said agents take this training, every year. There's usually a cybersecurity touch-up. Like every year, you've got to touch something, go through a training, say you agree to something, some sort of element. And I believe that is going to become more and more important as we move on, especially in this AI space. What I really don't want to happen, and I fear will happen, is that organizations will start disabling the clipboard, making it so you can't copy and paste, or installing an application to watch the clipboard. What are people copying? What are they pasting? I think in some organizations, it's already gotten to that level. I just hope that it doesn't get like widely distributed, because it's such a productivity drain. And I think that's really what we're asking here. What is the balance of productivity, employee productivity, and security risk that we are willing to take? And that is where you find your culture. That's where you find, what kind of organization you're a part of. That's where you see what the leaders are saying and how it's going to be implemented into your systems. Because some companies, especially startups, Twitter, Facebook, and the like, they will move faster and break things. And as a result, your data is a little bit more at risk. And we've seen that through their problems that they've had through the years. And so I think people just need,
what risk?
Every organization just needs to find what works for them. And I do think that regular trainings, the regular trainings will continue, because it can't go away. People are the only thing that can help you comply with these regulations, because otherwise they'll just find a way around it. Nothing is stopping me from going into the CRM and writing down Rob Dwyer. Here's his address, here's his phone number, his email address, and then typing it into another system. So security is a mindset, not necessarily a technical implementation.
Very interesting. I remember when I first got started in the contact center world, there was this shift in going paperless, right? It was everybody was trying to go paperless because of these exact same reasons that you're talking about, right? The danger is I can write down customer information on a piece of paper and notebook or what have you, and then I can take it somewhere. But the reality is that I can do that with a clipboard. And even more so, more and more employees who have access to sensitive data can work from home. So the way that we look at security has to evolve with that. I want to ask a little bit about some of the ways that we go about securing information, and just in general, like, are they effective, or do they just make us feel good at night? So let's talk about Passwords. 12 characters, at least one uppercase, one lowercase, a number, and a special character. What's your initial reaction to that?
Passwords is such a good one. I love passwords. It's such a good topic, and one that continues to change. You know, how many times do you get a text every day with a code now, with a 6-number or 5-number code? That's a lot of times. And passwords is a great one because it's one of the original tropes from IT. Everyone forgets their passwords all the time, you know, and when they reset their password, you know, your last password was your first parakeet. The second password is your second parakeet. The third password is going to be your third parakeet from high school. Like, you know, it's going to be your dog. Oh, Max is your dog. Oh, you got a new dog. His name is Larry. That's your next password. Great. And so passwords, they do work. This is why multi-factor authentication exists, is because passwords don't work. Humans refuse to let passwords work because we're fallible. We can't remember the strings. We can't remember our security questions and answers. And really, the only way to truly be secure is if you don't know the password. Right? If you can remember the password, then that's a problem. And those security questions, those shouldn't be real answers either, because I can find most of it on Facebook or through digital media, or maybe you accidentally shared that you used to live in Redwood Falls or whatever. And so the best security is biological, and then also multi-factor. So yes, type in a password. The password's only so secure. And then past that, you know, do a dual authentication to a phone, dual authentication to another service, dual authentication to another something. That is good enough. The problem comes when quantum computing becomes reality. When quantum computing becomes reality, the hashes that encrypt our data today are not secure enough to protect us from quantum data. So quantum encryption is kind of like one of the next things in technology. If you're into crazy nerdy stuff, I highly recommend you check it out. But quantum computing is it's a mind game. You really need to get your head wrapped around it a few times before you realize you don't understand it. And so I think that when we get to that point, they have this concept called Q day. When quantum computing is created and nothing is secure anymore, hopefully we're already ahead of it with quantum encryption. But if we aren't, how are we going to protect our data? And I think it's such a fascinating question, and one that AI is kind of helping us solve. It could be through obfuscation, you know. Instead of, you know, if I hack into your CRM system, instead of it being just your customers, it's actually your customers plus 8 billion other entries. And you have no idea which one actually is your customer, except for if you know this very specific detail about how the information is structured. And so there's all these concepts that have been theoretical for decades. And data nerds have loved thinking about them. The idea that data someday dies. IBM has some crazy patents about files that eventually disintegrate. They eventually don't have the information that you expected to have. And I think that's such a fascinating thing, that we're going to be able to leverage some of these crazy concepts that exist to sort of innovate the way that we think about security and information security. How's that for an answer, Rob?
I did not anticipate us getting into quantum computing on the show today, and I'm pretty sure it's the first time it's come up. Speaking of things dying, what tips for composting?
Oh my
do you
gosh,
have
Rob.
for me?
Okay, I love how deep you're going on this. This is fantastic. And this is the danger of sharing personal stuff on LinkedIn too, by the way.
Let's talk
my tip for composting, if you actually are a composter, like you save your food scraps to turn it into compost, my trick for composting is to freeze everything. everything that you're going to compost, you freeze it first, because then the cells all expand and then they explode. And so the structure of the food breaks down really fast. It's kind of like you're pre-chewing the food for the bacteria, the worms, and whatever else is going to, generate your compost.
That is a fabulous tip, and I know you did not see that one coming. You compost indoors. Is this true?
It is true. Yeah.
Okay. So for those that don't know, you live in the frozen tundra of Minnesota, up in the cities. So tell us why you choose to compost indoors, because there is a very good reason.
Since we have winter for 9 to 10 months out of the year, and most composters are outside, I needed a way to compost year round so I could make compost, really just remove waste from my life. And so I looked up this concept called vermiculture, which I had never heard of. And it's really, worms are eating your food scraps, and you put them in this multi-layer farm. And what happens is, as you're putting food in this farm, you start by the bottom layer, you put the food in, you put the worms in, and then they eat it and they make the compost. Then you put a new tray on top and you put your food in, and the worms will crawl up into the food and then begin eating that new food. And through some light, you take that bottom tray, put that on top, throw some light on it, scares all the worms back down into the first layer where your food is, and then you can take your compost and throw it out. It's a very fascinating process, very geeky, and I do have an outdoor composter too. That's a massive thing, and I think we're actually going to switch to just composting outside, because it does actually work kind of in the winter for Minnesota. And the composter we got is so big that I think we might be able to fit all of our winter food scraps in there and not worry about it.
If not, you just need to buy a bigger freezer.
Yeah. And you can store it. You can just, and that's the beauty of Minnesota winters. You do not need a bigger freezer in the winter. So I'm not sticking them in the freezer in the winter. It just goes outside. And I think that's where it's going to stay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. Maybe you and I will talk in more depth about composting in the future. I need to set up a compost pile. But I don't think that anyone hopped into this show thinking, oh, yeah, I'm going to get some composting tips. But I am curious, aside from composting and quantum computing, like, what do you really geek out about?
I love it. I would say the thing that I spend the most time geeking out on is the tech space. I can't, like, there's not a thing that comes across that I don't want to learn or be able to do. I don't like the idea that I talk about IT and I'm not well informed, or the concept that I might lose touch. I'm always kind of afraid of that as I grow older. Oh, the vulnerabilities coming out in this podcast, people. But it kind of in line with the composting, gardening. I love gardening. My personal goal is to be fully self-sufficient by the time that I retire, so that I don't have to buy a lot of extra food. I don't have to replace my clothes a lot. I'd like to reduce my costs and my impact on the earth as I grow as a human. And really, for me, it's an excuse to learn and understand the systems of the waste and the problems that I'm creating as a human consumer, not necessarily to judge it, because that is paralyzing, and no one can be perfect at being sustainable, but not taking a plastic bag at the grocery store has a huge impact. I can't, like, that little change in your life can have a massive impact on the trash that's blowing around in our earth. And so that's kind of what I geek out on the most, is probably sustainability after IT. And then after that, it's dogs. I love dogs. I've got 2 of them, and I spend so much time training them and spent loving them,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's go back to the gardening for just a moment. What is your favorite thing that you've grown?
I
in
have
your
to say
garden?
tomatoes. Tomatoes, if you don't, I didn't like tomatoes my whole life. And I realized why when I got older and started growing my own, that the ones in the grocery stores taste like garbage. They are absolutely terrible. You might as well eat a potato. They have basically the same flavor profile. And the tomatoes that you grow in your garden are so good that you can eat them alone. A tomato can be a meal. And if you haven't had a BLT with a fresh garden grown tomato, you are not living. It is key to your human experience to have a BLT, or if you're not a bacon person, you're vegetarian, do something else. Guac, lettuce, and tomato. I don't know exactly, but that's huge. And then I also really like spicy food. I am a huge spice lover. And so we grow quite a few different peppers. I think we have 3 different kinds this year. And if you like spicy food, DM me. I will bring you a jalapeno that will kill you. It is amazing.
I don't want to die, but I do love a good jalapeno. Spicy food is definitely up my alley. I am so hungry now. Thank you. We're recording this around lunchtime, and now you've put the thought of food in my head, and I appreciate it.
I'll get you hungry.
Thank you. I am no longer scared about quantum computing. I just want to eat. So, Matt, thanks for being on Next.
My pleasure.
This
I was
awesome.
so glad. I waited a long time in the queue, but here I am.
It can be rather long sometimes, but you know what they say. You save the best for season 3.
Nice, they do say that, don't they?
Something like that. I don't know. Next in Queue is brought to you by Happy To and is produced by me, Rob Dwyer. If you enjoy this podcast, please by all means subscribe and or rate this podcast in iTunes or your favorite podcast app. But more importantly, please tell just one person about this podcast. Word of mouth is the best way for people to discover new content. As always, thanks for listening.